Welcome back. Now, the rand has been trading stronger, especially against the dollar. Now, this as softer U.S. economic readings strengthened bets on a December Fed rate cut, putting pressure on the greenback. Investec chief economist Annabel Bishop joins us now with greater sense of these currency moves. Annabel, thanks so much for your time this evening. Let's talk about the strength we're currently seeing, of course, boosted by that risk-on mood today.
Yes, hi. Look, I think, we are obviously riding a bit of a wave at the moment.
Yeah.
We've had a credit rating upgrade. We've obviously seen, a good budget off the grey list. Ultimately, everything does come back to what's happening in the US. And of course, we have seen US dollar weakness this year. And, most interestingly, as you note, there's been a surge in global financial market risk on. And that, of course, has really come through in the US equity, strong purchases there. It's actually quite interesting that I was having a look at bonds today, foreign purchases of South African government debt. And while we saw massive purchases in the third quarter, it actually tailed off and actually saw net selling instead in October and November to date. So, of course, that's a bit confusing in a risk-on environment, but it seems as though there has been a resurgence into interest in equities in the US, and particularly, risky areas, as we said, risky investments, higher return. And that's also been centered, some of the surveys are showing in the tech stocks. So it seems as though there's been a bit of a switch in investment.
Yeah. And just on the back of the tech stocks, right, and concerns around overvaluation there, I'm just reflecting on some of the governor's comments, Governor Lesetja Kganyago last week at the MPC meeting, where he highlighted overstretched U.S. tech valuations. And I've been wondering what kind of impact that could have if we do see a potential correction coming through on emerging markets, whether it's the local currency or even the subs monetary policy moving forward.
So I think you're right to flag that, and obviously there is concern. I think what we need to bear in mind, though, is that we've obviously seen some upward revision to expectations around US growth, global growth, and of course the start of the cut in US interest rates. So we're not in an unusual situation. We've seen a few factors change. Of course, there is still that drag you mentioned. And, the worries, obviously, no one's saying necessarily there's proof that this is exactly what's going to happen now. But of course, the worries are at some point, do we see a bubble? Does the bubble burst? Do we move into some type of financial market instability? And I think it's quite right to, mention these concerns, these risks. And of course, they do fluctuate. But of course, as we said, US equities back in favor. We've seen the strong risk on. Let's not forget that there was a lot of uncertainty this year around US tariffs. Are they coming in? Are they not coming in? Are they going to be delayed? Now, obviously, they're in. And of course, the risk is that they could fall away with US, legal proceedings next year. Of course, we've also seen some tariffs roll back for South Africa, for example, in the agricultural sector. So really, overall, quite a bit of uncertainty. And I think, the fact that we have seen a delay, really essentially, in the full suite of tariffs coming in this year till August has also, of course, as well boosted that economic growth outlook. So I think you're quite right. There is still that uncertainty, but there's also been quite a few factors changing. And of course, that reflects in our domestic currency.
Yeah. And just on that tariff picture, Annabel, it's known that when tariffs come through, the dollar strengthens, right? But we've been seeing the inverse taking place this year. And I'm wondering what your assessment then is when it comes to the greenback. I mean, there's been even economists and analysts questioning whether the dollar still qualifies as a safe haven asset.
And I think also as well questioning about whether the US dollar is going to see further weakness next year, or if it's actually going to recover. And in fact, for the rand as well, will the rand continue to track stronger against the dollar? I think that's really a story in itself. Rand strength this year has very much been because of US dollar weakness. And in fact, actually, they're pretty much moved in tandem. If you look at the rand against the euro or the pound, for example, that's seen some recent weakness. We mentioned those positive factors earlier. Does the US still remain, well, first of all, the reserve currency? Most probably. It is obviously what commodity prices are priced in, the world's largest economy as well. But in terms of a safe haven investment, well, I suppose, here's really the interesting point. We know gold has surged enormously this year, and of course, that is your traditional safe haven investment. Interestingly, US treasuries have fallen a bit out of favor, and that's really where the safe haven component came in for the US dollar. Of course, as we said, there's been a switch into US equities. So I think, we are seeing some market fluctuations. Maybe we wouldn't say seasonality or cyclically, but we are seeing certainly some market fluctuations, equities more in favor. And I think, this volatility, this switching between investments is probably something that's going to continue. And obviously, because there's still uncertainty about how do US tariffs ultimately affect the US economy, how does that filter through into jobs, the US being very concerned about its labor market. And of course, that's been a key reason for the interest rate cuts. But let's be honest here, there are other factors affecting it as well, whether there's obviously immigration, AI, many other areas. So again, this uncertain environment.
Very uncertain environment, very complicated when considering all the factors at play and how they could influence the currency, the rand that is. Annabel, let's leave it there. Thank you so much for your time and sharing your insights with us this evening. That was Annabel Bishop, Chief Economist at Investec.